Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about a new strategy that the Trump administration has adopted to deal with the war in Iran, which is back to economic sanctions and as maximum pressure tactics that the Trump administration had adopted in the first term itself after they had withdrawn from the JCPOA. So the logic in the first term was that we withdraw from the JCPOA, take away all the imaginary or real benefits that Iran had gained from the JCPOA agreement, and then punish Iran by applying a maximum economic pressure to squeeze its economy, to hurt its people so that they may rise against their own government and bring about regime change. A logic that has not really worked with Iran. In fact, Donald Trump, every time he has talked and defended his military actions against Iran since Midnight Hammer, the operation in which he claimed that he had obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities, that was last year. In his justification of the use of force, Donald Trump has repeatedly said that 50 years of sanctions on Iran have had no effect on Iranian foreign policy or on the nature of the regime in Iran. And so he basically essentially was trying to tell us that sanctions don't work, at least as far as Iran is concerned. In fact, we know this even from sanctions which were in place on Saddam Hussein's Iraq at that time. The sanctions did not have any noticeable impact on the foreign policy of these countries, especially revisionist countries. We have seen sanctions on China also, but what it really does is hurts ordinary people. So you are trying to hurt a regime, but you end up hurting its own people. So Donald Trump kept saying that 50 years of sanctions on Iran have not worked, so we have no choice but to use force. And now neither force nor negotiation seems to be working. So what has really happened is that I think that Donald Trump has made a very profound mistake by not listening to American intelligence community or the American military, and just going by Netanyahu's presentations and by the Israeli lobby in this country, people like Ted Cruz and the late Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. So by just listening to people like that, who were just mouthpieces, including his own ambassador, Mike Huckabee, were just mouthpieces for Israel, he completely misread the reality of Iran and the situation in the Gulf, and went into an unintended, or shall we say, a foolish war, which he was misled in believing would be over in 4 to 6 weeks. Now we are into 6 months. The war is not over. And Iran and all the strategic goals that Donald Trump has stated from the beginning, none of those goals have been achieved. Let me quickly run through the goals. He wanted complete and unconditional surrender from Iran. It appears from the latest demands that Iran has made is Iran is asking the US to surrender. Number two, they thought that they would have a regime change. There would be an uprising in Iran and people would simply rise and remove this government. That has not happened. Number three, they said that they would end Iran's nuclear program and force Iran to surrender the 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium, up to 60% that Iran currently possesses. That has not been achieved. They were going to end Iran's support for its proxies, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas. In fact, in its latest demand, one of the conditions for opening Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian National Security Council has said that the US and Israel must stop attacking their proxies in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and in Palestine. So even that has not ended. They were going to destroy Iran's ballistic missile program and its drone. Well, on a daily basis, Iranians are still shooting missiles and they're still shooting drones. So on all those goals, the US, which was going to achieve all that in 4 to 6 weeks, it has failed completely. They have tried diplomacy. In fact, the US would have got some of these concessions in the negotiations that the Omanis were mediating just before the war. In fact, the foreign minister of of Oman came to the US to actually explain to Donald Trump that perhaps his son-in-law, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, were so focused on making real estate deals that they had not understood what the Iranians were saying. Some of the goals that Donald Trump is now fighting for, Iranians had already conceded those before this war started, but Trump, nevertheless, as I said, under pressure from the Israeli lobby or from Netanyahu, went into war. At some point, we need to have a serious discussion whether America is a sovereign state or not, whether America does enjoy a strategic autonomy that even third world countries now talk about. Does the world's singular superpower enjoy strategic autonomy, or are we a colonized state that works for the interest of a foreign country? Nevertheless, they went back into negotiations. There was a memorandum of understanding. So since April, we are in a kind of a starting now, stopping now kind of negotiations with Iran, and the demands of Iran have consolidated, and the US at least seems to have reduced its demand. Now the US doesn't talk about the ballistic missiles program, does not even talk about ending support for its proxies. It just wants the nuclear material, and it wants the Strait of Hormuz to be open. Sometimes Trump doesn't even talk about the nuclear material. He's just focused on opening the Strait of Hormuz and then calling it a victory. But even those things, even negotiations have failed. In fact, at the moment, there are no formal negotiations taking place. There are some mediations going on. Apparently, Isaac Dar, I think, the Pakistani foreign minister, flew into Iran today with some negotiations. It's not very clear whether there are any new ideas being put forward by the US, or whether Pakistan is taking an initiative and trying to convince the Iranians to come back to the negotiation table with the US itself. We don't know what is happening there. So even the negotiations have not achieved. So finally, Donald Trump is going back to the strategy that all other American presidents from Jimmy Carter onwards till now have adopted while dealing with Iran, is sanctions. So the US is now back to sanctions, not just in the war with Iran, but also with the war with Ukraine. Even there, the United States has failed in negotiations. Donald Trump tried to negotiate with Putin. It didn't work. Absolutely not. Putin didn't really care for what Donald Trump had to say, and so the war has continued. In fact, they met in Alaska, if you recall, and there was all this talk that Donald Trump would end this war in 24 hours. It is amazing how he can say such stupid things and not be held accountable by his supporters. That is amazing to me. One of the things with right-wing parties, whether it is Narendra Modi in India or whether it is Donald Trump in the United States, their supporters are like a cult figure. That like facts don't matter to them. And this guy made so many promises. Donald Trump promised no wars, promised no regime change wars, no forever wars, America first, and on top of that, I will end this war in 24 hours. None of that seems to be affecting his popularity with his supporters. I mean, they love him whether he's successful or whether he's a failure. So it is clear that they don't support him for his values. He has none, but they don't support him for his policies either, which he lost. So there are no policy achievements. Inflation is above 4%. He thought he would bring that down. That hasn't happened. He talked a lot about bringing manufacturing jobs to the Americas. None of that has happened. So on every promise that Donald Trump made, except immigration, he has failed. And so it is quite possible that his supporters are quite happy that the Trump administration is cruel and nasty towards people of other color and other origins. And so they still support him because ICE is so cruel, going around killing people, arresting on it about 14,000 people a day or 1,400. I don't remember the figure. But the only thing that the policy that Trump promised that is working is, look, we're going to be so cruel that no one would ever want to come to America again. And apparently the MAGA crowd is happy with that. But anyway, let me come back to the sanctions part. So there's a very good article today in the National Public Radio and NPR. I would recommend you Go and look at it. This is the best piece that has come out today in the global media on Trump's pivots back to sanctions for Iran because all other strategies have failed, and it is not very clear what the new sanctions are going to be. But what might happen is that these sanctions might also be targeting other countries. For example, a close ally of the United States, not this one, UAE, is being sanctioned today. US sanctions Dubai Crypto Exchange for aiding Iran's IRGC following a Reuters report. So remember, UAE is the champion of the Abraham Accords. It is a close ally of the United States. It is one of the few countries in the world which is close ally of Israel. In spite of that, Donald Trump is sanctions his ally in this war against Iran. Because he's so desperate to get things done. And this is also another signal to Arabs that, look, man, the only country this country cares about is Israel. So you can suck up to the United States as much as you like. You can give trillions of dollars in investments, billions of dollars to Trump's family, yet you will be sanctioned and you will not be defended to your satisfaction by the US military. What's the point of all the bases while Iran continues to attack you? But there's something else that is on the anvil today, which is this bill that is now being introduced into the House, and this should be of concern to those who are watching from India. If you remember, I did a show on this when the Senate bill passed. It's a Lindsey Graham sanctions bill. It is designed to impose. It is going to authorize President of the United States to impose sanctions in terms of tariffs from 0 to 100% on any country that buys oil from Russia. And the caveats of the bill, I went through it. Top 5 countries at the moment: China, followed by India. India is buying about $80 billion, is projected to buy about $80 billion. This would be the year in which India has bought the most Russian oil. In the past, it was around $65-66 billion a year. China buys more, but China is very rapidly decreasing its dependence on fossil fuels, and it has moved towards nuclear energy, hydroelectric, etc., and solar energy. So what is happening is that India, which remains heavily dependent on fossil fuels, will either continue to buy from Russia and face tremendous sanctions, up to 100% tariffs on everything that it exports to the US. And I think the US is the biggest India's export market. So it could heavily hurt India's economy and India's exporters if that bill goes through. And the mood in Washington seems to be that they're not looking at it in the context of Iran or India. They're looking at it in the context of Ukraine and Russia. And I think that bill will go through with bipartisan support. So there'll be some Democrats also who will vote for that bill. So what has happened now is Donald Trump has realized, or whether he's realized or not, I'm not very sure, that Donald Trump can, do 2 + 2 = 4. So he just goes by his instinct. He's lucky that some of his instincts have been very successful with regards to America's domestic politics. And as a result of that, he keeps winning domestic elections. But I hope he realizes that the use of military force in Iran is not working, and his negotiations tactics, whatever they are not working. Because remember, it's not Donald Trump who's negotiating. He's sending two, in my opinion, the most useless people in the American government. And one of them is not even in the government. Which country uses, it's like a banana republic. I'm sending my son-in-law, who has no official position, to negotiate on behalf of my country. This is what dictators of banana republics used to do, use their friends and their relatives, because they can't trust anybody in the country. America has millions of qualified diplomats who can do these negotiations, but he chooses his son-in-law and his buddy to go and do these negotiations. That's one of the reasons why I think the US is unable to do, because these guys don't know what they're talking about. Plus, their priority seems to be, can we make some money on the side? Can we make some money on the side? Can we invest something in real estate? And that kind of rubbish outlook is probably one of the reasons why the US is failing in its negotiations with Iran and everywhere else. Even in India, the India negotiations for the trade deal have been going on since February of 2025. So this is really 18 months negotiations, and nothing has come out of that either. So basically, to sum up, is that Donald Trump has now come back to down to earth. He has realized that military force is not working. He's realized that I'm not that big hotshot when it comes to negotiations, and so he's trying to put pressure. The logic seems to be that, look, the war has damaged Iran significantly, and so now on top of this military pressure, if you put some economic pressure, Iran will cave in. The Iranians, I think, fully understand that the reason why the US is under pressure is because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. There's an inflationary impact on America's economy. There's a midterm, a very critical elections coming, and the United States is running out of ammunitions. If the US was not running out of ammunitions, if the midterm elections were not this close, Donald Trump would have continued to bomb and destroy Iranian infrastructure, and that is what Israelis want. So he would have made Israelis happy. He would get billions of dollars more in election campaign money from the Israeli lobby in the US, and he could keep bragging that, look, I'm destroying civilization, etc. So there are a few things that Iran has got lucky on. The impact of the Strait of Hormuz. Actually, I do want to make this point that Iran's ally, China, has done a lot to reduce the impact of the closure of Strait of Hormuz. So in many ways, the country that has helped the US and undermine Iran's strategy has been China. Let me say that again. If China had not helped increase the supply of strategic oil reserves into the market, the price of oil would have been 150. It's only 90 right now. It's about 89 something. It's oscillating between 88 and 89. So, nevertheless, all of these pressures have happened because Iran has had these lucky things, these ducks lining up. Midterm elections, reduction in American supplies, because they've given so much of it to Israel to commit a genocide in Gaza and sold a lot of it to Ukraine. The US has run out of it, and it's going to take several years for the US to replenish its supplies. In fact, this is perhaps the best time for China to invade Taiwan if it wants so. The US is not war ready at the moment, sadly, because of the adventurism of both Biden and Donald Trump in Eurasia and in the Middle East. Anyway, so the summary of this talk is this: Donald Trump has failed at war. He has not achieved any of his strategic goals after 6 months of warfare with Iran. He has not achieved anything through diplomacy. In fact, what gains he had made in January, he threw it away in favor of war, and now is regretting that, I'm sure. So failed in war, failed in diplomacy, is now going back to the old tested method of sanctions. Will it work this time? Maybe it might. Iran's economy is hurting significantly. Iran's unemployment rate has reached 9.1%. Iran's inflation, according to some estimates, IMF says 68%. There are sources within Iran itself which are saying 87%. I was on Al Jazeera just an hour ago debating an Iranian scholar who says the inflation is nearly 100% in Iran. I was very surprised. In fact, those of you who watch Al Jazeera should watch that debate. There was no debate because the Iranian scholar was quite honest and candid about the economic challenges that Iran is facing. So the data that I was sharing, he was sharing the same data. So it was not exactly a debate. We both were kind of saying the same thing, that inflation is close to 100% in Iran. Not only that, that means everything is costing double right now. Unemployment is high, and exports have declined. Iran was selling $2 billion worth of 2 million barrels per day at the beginning of the war, and now it has come down to 500,000 barrels. So it's dropped by 75%. is exports. In fact, the land routes also, Donald Trump was saying that he's also targeting Iran's highway infrastructure. So it's going to make it more difficult for Iran to export by land. Iran has about 7 countries which border it: Pakistan, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey. So it can send Iraq, so it can send stuff to these countries. But the US is trying to destroy those land routes and trying to close them down also. So we will see what ultimate package Scott Bessent comes up with. But right now, there are 2 sets of sanctions that the US is working on. One is targeted on Iran, but it will also target countries which are in any way facilitating Iran's economic revival or survival. And the other is targeting Russia, and this the target is going to be essentially China and India to some extent. And the other countries that are in line are Saudi Arabia, Turkey, as well as some European Union countries. But I think Trump will waive the sanctions on European Union countries because, one, they are very small, and two, they are desperate, countries like Slovenia, etc. The Saudis can immediately retool. As soon as the sanctions pass, I think the Saudis will stop buying cheap Russian oil, which they buy for their energy consumption, and they will resort to using their own oil. So it'll cost them a little extra, but they will be exempt from sanctions. Turkey, I think the US will somehow deal with Turkey. And so basically the focus comes on China and India, which are the 2 biggest buyers of Russian oil. And if the US imposes any sanctions or tariffs on China, China will retaliate. India will not. India has no leverage on the US. China has lots of leverages on the US. It can stop buying soya beans, which it agreed to do recently. It can also stop supply of critical magnets and rare earth minerals to the United States, which are critical for redeveloping the stockpiles of weapons and missiles and rockets that the US is running out of. So so China has leverage against the US. And the bill that is proposed actually gives the president the freedom to impose anywhere between 0 to 100%. So I think Donald Trump will target India if the bill passes, to show that, oh, I'm helping the Ukrainians, I'm putting pressure on Russia, but may not target China. I am not very sure what will happen with Turkey, which is the 3rd biggest buyer of Russian oil. It's about $5 billion over 3 months. So about $20 billion worth of oil that the Turks buy. I don't know, maybe Saudis could help them out now that they have a mutual joint defense agreement, the Makkah agreement. And so maybe the Saudis might find some way to send them oil. But we will see what happens with Turkey. It is quite possible, because it is going to look terrible if Donald Trump exempts China, exempts Turkey, exempts European Union, and only sanctions India. So it will look as if this bill was passed only to sanction India and raise the tariffs. And if the tariffs are imposed, India can immediately stop buying Russian oil and turn to Venezuela and the US. It will cost India more, but India will probably do that as soon as this is passed, because they don't want those additional tariffs tagged to them. Because once your exports begin to lose market, it's not easy to win them back. So, but nevertheless, it will look as if Trump is targeting only India, and I don't think he wants to do that. Anyway, so thank you for watching Conversations. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this with your socio-political network. In the last 2 days, I've had 2 very critical interviews. One with Lieutenant General VP Singh, who has an interesting idea, a set of suggestions, and literally an advice to Donald Trump on how he can win this war. So there are some tactical and strategic suggestions made by General VP Singh, and we go back and forth on that. So please take a look at that video. And a day before that, I had a brilliant discussion with Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, who is just stunning. And in fact, I've been getting messages from other Indian former diplomats and ambassadors congratulating me for this excellent interview with Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, who was just terrific in this interview. And it basically was on the Mecca Joint Defense Agreement, and he talks about it, and he emphasizes why it's a very significant development, but he also says that it is not going to hurt India's interests. So take a look at that also. Anyway, thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtadar Khan. Take care.